Good evening and welcome all. The parsha that we are heading to this week is Chaye Sarah. But as we know, it's a misnomer, and let's see if we're doing better than the last week here with the technology. It's a misnomer because actually Sarah is alive for one verse in the parsha. We have it here. Right? Vayu Chaye Sarah. Sarah lived, and it gives her a lifetime, 127 years. In verse 2, Vatamat Sarah, and Sarah passed on. So she's alive for one verse, and then we move on to other stories, which we'll come back to in a moment. So, why choose Chaye Sarah as a name for a parasha that really does not describe her life, but rather her death, Vatamot, she died, and what happened beyond her death. Is that appropriate? And it's not a question of, well, it's just random, the first words of the parasha, because we could call the parasha Vayiyu, like there's a portion called Vayikra, or Vayelech. So words that are not very descriptive. They actually, the name of a parsha has got to be descriptive. It's got to be like a heading. When they put out newspapers and magazines, sub-editors spend a lot of time choosing appropriate headings for the columns and the articles. The heading has got to fit. Chaye Sarah does not seem to fit, and I'm going to give you the traditional answer, and I'm going to reject that because it doesn't sound so simple. You see, we as Jews don't just talk about remembering, immortalizing. When we talk about somebody who's passed on, we want to make their life continue. We want that legacy to carry on. So rather than just talk about the legacy and the memory and immortalizing somebody, remembering them and blessing their memory, and I'm not quite sure what blessing a memory is all about, but that's become very much part of a vocabulary. May his or her memory be blessed. Yeah, we go beyond that. We talk about continuity. That is, that a life continues beyond the span, the time it's spent physically in this world. I'm going to share a story with you, which is kind of, appropriate for the times. But here's a picture, a difficult picture. It's a picture of a young man called Ariel Zohar. And if he doesn't look very happy, it's because this picture was taken at the funeral of his father, mother, and two sisters. He lived in Nachal Oz, and on that morning of what we call the Black Shabbat, he had gone for an early morning run. And then when he heard alarms and shooting, etc., he just escaped into the nearest shelter and spent the day locked up there. And when eventually he was able to get out, he found out that what was his home, where Mishpachat Zohar lived, well, there was nobody there anymore. The entire family had been wiped out and he'd been saved just because, thank God, he had gone for that early morning, Shabbos morning run. And of course, he was told to evacuate like everyone else from that particular settlement. And he was going to his grandparents who live in Rishon LeZion, in the center of the country. But he made a request. He said, behind this door, inside our apartment, there is something I want. And Bar Mitzvah is in 2 weeks' time. And I would like my father's tefillin. These are tefillin that were given to him by his father, a Holocaust survivor, given to the grandfather by his own father when he was 12 years old and before. His that would be great-grandfather perished in the Holocaust. His grandfather survived. He wants these tefillin. And the army agreed. And I heard an interview with the gentleman from Zaka who was given permission to go into that home. And he was told 6 minutes. 6 minutes during which he first identified the tefillin and then grabbed whatever else he thought would be of any value. He and a few friends who were with him there, and then the army started to shout, get out, because obviously they had to get out of that area as soon as possible. And there's a picture that captured everyone's hearts of that Zaka volunteer. You can see the badge on his shirt, walking out with the tefillin. That's continuity. That's not just remembering. It's not just sentimental values, and it's so moving. The not yet 13-year-old boy would want that item from the home, beyond anything else. So we say Chaye Sarah, the parsha is about kind of continuing the legacy of Sarah. But what do we read about? Maybe 4 main themes. Her death, that's the verse I showed you earlier. Then her burial arrangements, Avraham bargaining with the Hittites to be able to be given a burial plot in exactly where he wanted her buried. And then the marriage of Yitzchak. And the marriage of Yitzchak, which culminates in the following verse. And so we all know the story. Eliezer goes off, goes to find a wife. And then it says, he brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, took Rebecca as his wife. It's like, found comfort after his mother's death. It's like, let's move on. Sarah has died, and now here's a replacement. So where do we see this continuity? I think what we're reading about in the parasha, it would seem, and I know this goes contrary to everything that rabbis have taught, have preached and over the years, and goes contrary to the I don't know, the many eulogies that we delivered in the course of this week. We talk about, the real life is the soul afterlife. It doesn't seem that this parasha describes that process at all. And wait, final paragraph of the parasha, almost penultimate paragraph of the parasha. Here we go. Avraham got remarried to Keturah, and the children, and the verse continues with grandchildren, and those become all kind of the offspring of Avraham beyond his first 2 children, Ishmael and Yitzchak, of course. Yes, people say that Yitzchak was instrumental in organizing this shidduch. It becomes even more shocking when we found out who this Keturah is. And this is what Rashi says. Rashi says Keturah is just no name for Hagar. Remember Hagar, the woman Avraham sent away twice at Sarah's bidding? It seems almost so disloyal that he would go and marry, this woman that he, had sent away initially, and then a second time after Ishmael was born, he was, causing grief. It would seem, as one actually looks at the parasha, that this is not the life of Sarah. This is the sidelining of Sarah. This is what happens after she's no longer with us and is no longer involved in this world, and how they kind of seem to be moving on and doing without her. What kind of marriage did Sarah and Avraham have? So the Torah records 2 arguments. And interestingly enough, both of those arguments revolve around Hagar, and then Hagar and Yishmael. And let's try and put a bit of background to that, a bit of philosophy to that. I mean, there were people, if If they had a petty disagreement about whose turn it was to take out the garbage, that wouldn't be in the Torah. So the Torah records their kind of tension over this issue. It must be that there's something deeper and something we want to learn out from that. So what is it that we want to learn? Well, let's go back to, I wouldn't say the beginning, but a few parashas back. And there is the covenant where Avram's name is changed. Now, what was he before? Avram. Then God says, no longer Avram, but Avraham. And that is because he is now Avraham, which is Av Hamon Goyim, a father of a multitude of nations. That's Avraham. Avraham is not just the father of the Jewish nation. Avraham is actually the father of a multitude of nations. And Avraham, as we know, contributed monotheism, which spread around the world beyond just the Jewish people. So it is estimated there are 3.3 billion monotheists in the world. There would be about 55% of the world's population that ascribe to a so-called Abrahamic faith. And that's Avraham and his legacy. What about Sarah? Well, Sarah also has a name change. And this happens a little bit later in the same parasha, Lech Lecha, where Avraham says, your wife will no longer be Sarai, she'll be Sarah. And he says, I will bless her, and I will give you a son from her. And she will become the rulers of people who will issue from her. And Avraham is, as we know, incredulous, and he's, he says he laughed. It's actually this is laughter of joy, and his reaction is, Hashem, only that Yishmael might live by your favor, and Hashem says no. I hear as far as your request for Yishmael. I bless him. He will be fertile, very numerous. He'll be the father of 12 chieftains. I'll make him into a great nation. With my covenant, I will maintain with Yitzchak, whom Sarah shall bear to you at the season next year. It's understanding this kind of separate world philosophies that Avraham and Sarah has. Avraham has been given the mission of being the father of the entire world. He is responsible for the faith of what will turn out to be billions of people who follow his legacy, and they're all his children. Sarah is going to be the mother of he who is going to be his actual seed, and with whom the covenant is going to be made, that is Yitzchak. And this explains their tension subsequently when it comes to the birth of Yishmael and then Yitzchak. This explains this most famous argument between the two, when Sarah says to Avraham, and this is after she's witnessed Yishmael, not behaving in the way that he should, and she says to her husband, cast away Hagar and her son. I do not want the son of that slave to have a share in the inheritance of my son Yitzchak. She was not talking about the camels and the donkeys and the gold and the silver that they had received from Pharaoh years earlier. She was talking about the covenant. She says, no, Yishmael, as Hashem has told you, it's got to be sidelined. We talk about Yitzchak. Of course, Avraham has got a different philosophy, and he's very unhappy about that. And he says, no, this is my son, and my legacy goes beyond the narrow Yitzchak. And Hashem says, don't be distressed over the boy. Whatever Sarah tells you, do as she says. For Ki v'Yitzchaki karel chazara. For your offspring will be continued through Yitzchak. So your real legacy. So it's like, and there's where there's a tension between the two in terms of where should the emphasis go. Avraham, universalist, and Sarah, much more, for lack of a better word, nationalistic. She's thinking about the Jewish people and their future. She's not talking about the world and their faith. There's a very interesting Gemara, and there's of course the steps leading to Machpelah, which is the cave where they were buried, and you got these steps, and then you go further, and there's more steps, and you get to the top over there. You've got all of these kind of memorials to Avraham and Sarah, and Yitzchak and Rivka, and Yaakov and Leah. But it is unlikely that kind of the burial place is right beneath there. And there's a whole legend about the 7 steps, and that somewhere there is more likely to be the actual burial place. So the Talmud in Baba Batra talks about a great man called Rab Bana. Rab Bana spent a lot of time identifying graves, which was very important because that they observe the laws of purity and impurity, and if you step over a grave, you become impure. So Kohanim know not to go on graves, but even Israelites, if they want to go into the Beit HaMikdash, if they want to go into the temple, if they want to eat consecrated foods, wouldn't be able to go there. The Gemara says that Rabbana was busy marking burial graves, and then he arrives at the cave of Avraham, Machpelah, and he wants to work out exactly where you may and may not go. So at the entrance of the cave is Eliezer. Of course, he's loyal servant of Avraham, and he's standing before the entrance. Bana says, may I go in? What's Avraham doing right now? And Eliezer says, well, he's lying in the arms of Sarah. She's examining his head. And of course, it's very interesting, just for the purpose of completeness over here. He says, go and tell him, but now standing outside, so that he can make himself decent. This is a very intimate moment. And Eliezer says, look, they're in the higher world, they're not in this world, and there's no evil inclination there, and therefore it's not awkward. So he came in, examined the grave, and exited. But what is this about? He's lying in the arms of Sarah, examining his head. I mean, what do you look for in head? In the head, you look for what do they call them? Lice. And what's the significance of Sarah checking Avraham's hair? I'll show you somewhere where I've got here. What's the significance of Sarah checking Avraham's hair for lice? Lice are parasites. They're not really, not part of the system, so to speak. And Sarah, even beyond she and her and her husband's life in this world, Sarah is making sure that there's no parasitic elements coming from drawing on Avraham, because she wants to limit Avraham's influence to her son. And of course, Avraham, has got a different worldview, and that's the deeper significance of this exchange. Now, if we look at it, the Pasha, carefully, what we're finding is Avram acting in ways that are true to the legacy of Sarah. And who's the main protagonist in the entire Pasha? It's Yitzchak. Yes, it's Yitzchak's proxy when it comes to finding a wife. Eliezer goes on his behalf. He actually, for halachic reasons, cannot leave the boundaries of the Holy Land. But he's finding her a wife that's suitable. He doesn't want to find a Canaanite wife. He wants to find a wife that is correct for them to build the future, true to a legacy of Sarah. And there's a verse just after the one that I quoted to you before that describes, there we go. It says, he brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah. And there Rashi says, it's taken from Bereshit rather, he says, it's not just that she became a replacement. It is that she took over her legacy. That while Sarah was living, there'd been 3 miracles, one of the famous miracles, like burning the tent from Shabbos to another, blessing in the dawn, a cloud hanging over the tent, and those that stopped, when Rivka comes, it reappears, which means that it is really Sarah living on, not Sarah being sidelined, and this is what she stood for. And this is actually, we've spoken about this in a share, Chayei Sarah, a couple of years ago. The three mitzvahs of women specifically, which is the laws of niddah, the laws of kashrut, as well as Shabbos candles. Those are the three mitzvahs. So when we say into his mother's tent Sarah, or into his mother Sarah's tent, it's not about sidelining Sarah and saying she's not irrelevant. No, it's about choosing a wife which is going to help Yitzchak continue that philosophical legacy of Sarah, which is to be the father of the Jewish people. And coming back to Avraham's second marriage, so we also wonder, how does this fit in? How do we explain Avraham getting married to Keturah? Well, we've got to read the entire paragraph, not out of context. We got to read until the very end. So what does it tell us about Avraham and his marriage to this other woman? After having listed the children of Keturah and their grandchildren, and those are all the other people, besides Ishmael, the Ishmaelites, who are monotheists, and all of the other religions that have adopted monotheism and call themselves adherents to the Abrahamic faith. Avraham willed all that he owned to Isaac. We're talking about the legacy. But then the sons of the concubines, in other words, Keturah's children, he gave them gifts while still alive, and he sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to a land of the east. So even his marriage to Keturah is, yes, to continue fulfilling his own legacy of being the father of many nations, but at that same time, Avraham actually, before he passes on, sidelines all the others and reinforces the legacy of Yitzchak. So although Chayei Sarah would seem to be the parasha where Sarah's kind of influence ends, when one reads the subtext of the stories of the parasha, they are all about actually following Avraham, setting aside his own world mission of being a father to many nations and immortalizing, continuing with the teaching of Sarah, who has said, as Hashem said, "Yitzchak yikarech Azara," your true seed will be that of Yitzchak. And that's what Avraham is busy doing right through this parasha of Chayei Sarah. Thank you very much. I think we're going to have to end it here because I'm struggling a bit, but I wish you a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, everybody.